Hi,
Okay.
everybody. I'm Steve Lee of the Hollywood Sound Museum, and I'm thrilled to have Simon Hayes, renowned production mixer. How are you, sir? I'm so glad you come in all the way from across the pond in jolly old England. How are you, sir? Tell me how you're doing.
Steve, it's such an honor to be invited. Thank you so much for putting this on for me. We've been trying to get this together for months and
We
months,
have, yeah, yeah. Well, but
and this, serendipity this week was good for us both, and we've got lots to talk about. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much. And you're actually the first production sound mixer we've had. I've been trying to get. I've got connections and I've talked to a few out there, but for whatever reason, you're the first, and it's great that you're the first because you've got such a diverse credit list. I mean, you've done a lot of musicals. Let me just breeze through this. X-Men, Mamma Mia, Les Miserables, Kingsman, Mary Poppins Returns, No Time to Die, you're up for an Oscar, the Disney remakes, Aladdin, and all those. It just runs the gamut. I think that's one of the fun things about what we do is, every time we jump on a new film, it could be something completely different than the last time. I think that's really exciting, and that keeps us fresh, I think. So.
I've been incredibly fortunate. I've worked with some fantastic directors right from the get-go in my career.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a certain amount of luck involved in a career. And when you couple that with hard work and passion, you've got something quite powerful. And
Absolutely.
I certainly had some luck involved at the beginning of my career, but I maximized on it. I did the very, very best I could. I recorded as much great dialogue as possible and really reduced the loop count on all of my early movies, and that paid dividends, and I got invited back. So I'm just incredibly fortunate to be here.
That's awesome. That's really great. You actually started when you were a teenager, didn't you? Is that right? Tell us about your origin story here, how you got into this mess.
Well, look, I'm a second generation sound mixer. My father's a sound mixer.
Oh, wonderful.
And so basically I got involved as a runner, which is like an assistant on commercials when I was 16. I
Sure.
went and learned the business in commercials. I didn't know right then if I wanted to be in sound, but I had a passion for sound. I was mixing and cutting and scratching hip hop in my bedroom, and and setting up sound systems and putting two turntables together. So I kind of I knew I was very passionate about music, but I wasn't super sure which department I wanted to go into the film industry. Then in the commercials company I was working in, I had a good look at all of the different departments, and whenever we were out shooting, I would always gravitate towards the sound department because I kind of got what they did. I
Yeah.
understood. I would kind of, if someone needed a hand, I'd always want to go and help the sound department. And I realized after a couple of years that that's where my passion lay. And at that point, that's where I made the move into sound. I
Mhm.
was very fortunate that my father was a production sound mixer. So at that point, I went and asked him whether I could come and join him, and I started as his utility,
Yeah.
which we called at that person at that point we were called a third person
Sure.
in the sound department in the UK. And I watched his boom operator for a couple of years. Then I started boom operating for him, and then something very, very, again, a very fortunate thing happened. My father retired to become a producer,
Oh,
which
wow.
came out of the blue. He went out for lunch one day, got offered a job as a producer, and came back and said, "Look, I'm retiring from
I'm done.
sound. I'm
Wow.
done, and you need
Wow.
to get out on your own."
Yeah.
And effectively, what happened was I started looking for other sound mixers to go and boom for,
Mhm.
which I did do. But at the same time, a lot of the people that I'd met on commercials started asking me to come and mix.
Mhm.
And so I got a very, very early jump into production sound mixing on commercials when I was about 21.
Wow.
Um,
Did you use his old rig or
yeah, 100%. Yeah, he
hey,
passed that on to me, which was, and
is
I
that
started.
the Nagra right there that you're
That's the Nagra right there that he gave me.
that's great.
And funny enough, that was right. It was around 1991, which was a pivotal time. It was where we suddenly started using timecode, and so he gave me a Nagra 4S, and that has got the time code modification on it,
Right.
which I actually, the first few jobs I did, I saved up all of the money so that I could get it modded to time code. And that is, that Nagra is the time code mod that I very proudly paid for myself out of my first few jobs money. And I did hundreds of commercials on that Nagra. And then by the time I did my first movie, we just moved on to that, which was 1997 when I
Yeah.
was 27 years old.
Right. Right. Yeah, I remember you were saying just a little earlier, we both started about the same time and
Yeah.
witnessed the great conversion from analog to digital. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, the different disciplines between both of them. And there's some good, some bad, but yeah.
What was great about analog was it taught you that you had to get that needle in the right position. You
Yes.
you know you had to get the signal down on the tape, because if you didn't, your rushes, your dailies would have, you know what I mean? And but you didn't want to go too hot because you'd have the thing square waving. So you
Right.
know we didn't have nearly as much for the young people watching that started in the digital domain. What the difference was, we didn't have the amount of scope, we didn't have the dynamic range that we all have now on digital. So we kind of had, we had 10 dB of 10, 12 dB where you want the needle to
That
be,
was our window.
ra-
Yeah.
rather than 30 dB, 30 or 40 dB, which we have now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a
Yeah.
great training ground, and I really appreciate it. And I feel blessed that I had that first sort of 3 or 4 years learning the trade on the Nagra
Yeah.
before I moved into the digital domain.
That's great. Yeah, like I was telling you earlier, I cut sound on analog on 2 shows on film, and I'm so grateful to have had that, because there's so many disciplines from that I carry over and really respect. Uh,
Yeah.
so one of the first questions I like to ask everybody is, explain generally what you do. If you're explaining to a lay person or a child what your job is.
That's really simple. I capture the original performances. That is what my passion is.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that when the actors put in a fantastic performance on the movie set, we capture it, and the recording is high quality enough that that is the recording that makes its way into the cinema for the viewers in the cinema seats. And I feel that there's a certain amount of magic which is really unique that happens on a movie set. And
Sure.
I feel that all of us, it doesn't matter whether you're the costume designer, whether you're the DP, whether you're production designer, makeup designer, all of us have been hired for one specific thing that we all have in common, and that is to support and not and endeavor to really capture those original performances. Whatever department we're in, it's our job to make those actors feel comfortable, to make them look great, and to capture those performances. And in the sound department, it's not easy, because everything on a movie set is about the visual image.
Sure.
You know, everything, whether it's, again, makeup, production design, lighting, camera moves, everything is focused on the visual image. And then there's us in the sound department, and it's our job to prioritize the audio and make sure that all of that spoken dialogue is recorded as crisply and as perfectly as possible. And sometimes when I first started, people used to say, other sound people who were kind of getting beaten down, and they say, well, no one cares about sound. I always saw that as a real positive, because it meant that no one told me how to do my job. I saw it as I could really be in charge of what I was doing. Everyone's got an opinion about where the camera is. Everyone's got an opinion about, how the shot should look. No one's got an opinion about how it would sound. They just leave us to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really enjoy that aspect of it. I really enjoy that me and my team are the kind of gatekeepers of the audio, and that we're just left alone. Directors kind of give you the job, and you collaborate in prep, and you talk about what you're trying to achieve, but you start shooting, and you're left alone to do a great job. And I really enjoy that side of it.
That's wonderful. That's really good. And nowadays with all the special effects and green screens and things like that, some of it makes our job easier, some of it doesn't. I mean, with a green screen and being able to recomp the backgrounds and things like that has left it open to the production sound crew sometimes to get a boom a little closer than they might not have before and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about those challenges? Just
You know
you
what? There's always positives and negatives, and what I would say about shooting with green and blue backgrounds is, yeah, there's a certain amount of opportunity to get the microphones closer, but guess what? If that blue or green background is going to be replaced with an exterior visual effects build, they're going to put wind machines on it. So so right, so we're given something with one hand and it's taken away with the other hand.
Right,
And
right.
so, what being a great sound mixer and any member of the sound team is all about on the set is finding solutions to problems and making sure that when we're presented with an issue, rather than saying, hey, we can't do that, this is hopeless, it's finding a solution to the problem, always looking at a situation logically, working our way through it, and working out how we're going to save this original performance, and just really prioritize that dialogue. Because the thing about production sound is, the reality is, of course, we want to get great sound effects, we want to get great Foley, but all of those things can be rebuilt beautifully afterwards by our colleagues in sound post. And respect to all of those guys. They do an absolutely wonderful job. And what I've kind of built my career on, and this is just my perspective, whether I'm right or not, what we're talking about is art. So there is no right or wrong. There's just opinions, and
Sure.
they're all beautiful opinions. But my opinion is this: if I can record really, really fantastic, rich, close production dialogue, it's going to really help the incredibly creative sound effects design and build that happens in post-production. And it's
Absolutely.
all and it's almost like, let me rewind for a second.
Sure, sure.
A really famous visual effects supervisor once said to me, I like to speak to people about their craft on
Sure.
set.
Yeah.
And I went to this incredible visual effects supervisor, and I said to him, what's your secret? And he said, I'll tell you what my secret is. If we can just have 51% in camera real, I will build the other 49%, and it will be seamless and beautiful and no one will ever know. He said, and that's the balance that I look for.
Yeah.
51% real in camera, and then I'm good to go on the other 49%.
That's
And I
great.
thought, I love that mentality,
Yeah,
because it's
that's
very
really good.
similar to how I feel about production dialogue. If I can save all of that production dialogue and make it rich and beautiful, I know that it's going to sell the incredible work that my brothers and sisters do in sound post, with the sound design, with the Foley, with the effects, with the score. And when we blend the whole thing together, that collaboration is real, and the audience believe it.
That's the thing. We're all telling a story. We're all, soldiers for the director leading this war, and we're all telling the same story. And if we make it believable and just make them accept it and not know what we did,
Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah. No,
exactly
absolutely.
that. Exactly that.
Absolutely.
And listen, occasionally there's going to be the odd scenes that will need looping. But if we can really make sure that as much as possible isn't looped, then those lines that are looped, for whatever reason, if it's because there was a huge wind machine, or if it's because the director and the actor decide, you know what, let's go a
Performance.
different way in post, let's
Mhm.
try something different creatively,
Sure, sure.
then the body of real live production sound will probably hide that little scene that's looped.
Oh,
The
sure.
problem comes when, like my visual effects colleague said, when suddenly we swing too far one way and there's too much loop, and you go, oh, okay, I'm not sure I
Oh,
believe that.
sure.
And so
Sure.
again, it's that collaboration. It's not saying, one thing is bad or one thing is negative. It's trying to create as much live possible, because what that does is it makes the stuff that we do rebuild more believable.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. um, I don't want to name names or be a naysayer for anything like that, but I have met a few old school production mixers who kind of just sort of give into the situation that, they're just going to get whatever tracks they get, not make noise, and just sort of, do the best they can without making waves or anything like that. But there are, I mean, someone like in your position, you've worked on so many films with so many directors. I don't feel you have a problem stepping up and saying something. And I wish more people were like that genuinely want to get the tracks there on the set as best possible, instead of just sort of, slinking around and not worrying about it, and just whatever they get, they get. Um, I mean, it's just a great philosophy that you have, that just, just with sometimes with just minimal effort, you can
Well,
get
look,
it right there.
here's the thing. I
Yeah,
mean, the first thing that I'll say on that subject is
please.
there are some directors that want to work with a mixer like me that will say, hold on a second, that's not good.
Yeah.
Can we please try something else? Instead of having that wind machine, can we try bringing in three guys with, and wafting with, and trying to do this without the background noise. And there are other directors that actually would prefer to have a sound mixer that doesn't get too vocal and doesn't try and put their foot down in any way. And here's the thing: I've been really fortunate that I've found the type of director that want me as a sound mixer, and they want my input, and they're looking for someone to say, actually, this could be better, there's another way of doing it. And I'm sure that my methodology isn't going to suit every director, and so there is room for lots of different ways of working.
Sure,
But the
sure.
other thing that I'd say is this: there really is, with regard to what you just said,
Mhm.
there really has been a massive step forward in the ability of what a production sound mixer can do for a number of reasons.
Yes.
One of the reasons that we're so blessed now and so capable is because of multi-tracking.
Right.
Now,
We talked about that.
there was a point in, let's say, the mid 90s, the late 90s,
Mhm.
before we all started multi-tracking, when we were working on two tracks with that. And
Mhm.
it was and on big movies, when the director got three cameras out and wind machines, and we only had two tracks, and lavalier and radio microphones weren't great, perhaps there was a moment in time where sometimes production sound mixers had to go, okay, it's a guide track,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
was the correct thing to do because there was limitations of what was achievable with equipment. But the fact is that the moment we started multi-tracking and radio mics got more powerful, what we were able to do became suddenly far more achievable.
Yeah.
And there was a tipping point where we were able to say, okay, so we've got 10 tracks. I mean, now I'm recording 34 tracks, but right then
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
10 tracks. So, okay, so we've got six people in this scene. Let's put them all on lavs. The lavs have started sounding better. Let's put let's put two booms out, and suddenly that wind machine and the three cameras isn't quite so much of a problem as it was 10 years previously. But then let's fast forward another 10 years into sort of modern times, and we know that our post colleagues have got such powerful plugins. We have Isotope, we have Cedar, we have all of these really, really incredibly positive tools that can be used on the dialogue in post. And so now, rather than giving up and saying, look, we might as well just call this a guide track because the wind machine is going to be too heavy. We never, the whole deal is now we never ever give up, because we know that the tools in post are incredibly powerful. And if we just get enough signal onto the track, they'll be able to deal with the noise. And the signal is the dialogue, and the noise is the background underneath it.
Right.
And as long as we have that dialogue sitting out in front of the noise, um, you know, we've got the dialogue here, we've got the noise here. They'll notch that noise out with Isotope. And so I really think that there has been an incredible step forward with the plugins and what can be done in post. And what I would advise all young mixers right now coming through is,
Mhm.
don't underestimate what they can do to your tracks. Don't give up, because even when you're listening through the cans and it sounds like a train wreck background noise wise, home in on the dialogue, don't give up, keep the wind off the mics, and they'll deal with the background noise.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. To go back to the point you were at, with, directors who, appreciate what we do and coming, repeat business, as it were. You have several directors that you've worked with more than once. Just looking through your list, you have Matthew Vaughn, Rob Marshall, Guy Ritchie, and you. What that must be a wonderful thing when you have a bit of a rapport and you get to know each other and sort of have sort of a shorthand kind of way of talking about things. That must make your life incredibly easy on set.
I think that what we're all looking for as production sound mixers is to develop trust with our directors.
Mhm.
Once there is trust there, that is all we can ask for out of a relationship. And what I have been very successful with is being able to build that trust. And generally, what will happen on that first movie where the director doesn't know me, they'll kind of go, okay, this sound mixer, he's very obviously very passionate about what he does, but he will tell me when things aren't good. And so, look, I don't go kind of head on like a bull in a china shop. You still have to be very sensitive about the situation. You have to be aware that there is more going on in the director's mind than just the sound recording. One of my secrets is I don't talk about sound on the set. I talk about performance. If
Okay.
I've got a problem with sound, I will always talk about capturing the performance. And what I will present my situation and say, I've got an issue here that's going to be hampering my ability to capture the performance, rather than saying this background noise is ruining the sound. And you can see instantly how it's more palatable and understandable, because people who don't listen to sound and that don't mix sound is a mystery to them because they can't see it. Again, we're back to this thing that film is a visual image and you can't see sound. But what everyone on the set does understand is performance. And what is the sound? The sound is the performance. And so by just exchanging those two words, I find I get an incredible amount of additional support. The moment I swapped those two words, sound and performance, there was marked difference in the way that people would react to what I was saying.
Right.
And so what I try and do on that first movie is just show directors that I'm passionate and that I want to support them. I never want to say you can't do it like that, or what I try and do is present solutions to issues rather than have a brick wall, well, that's not going to work attitude. And then, hopefully what has happened over the years is they go into sound post afterwards and their dialogue editor says, you know what, we're not going to have to loop much of this. And the director goes, oh, so that guy did, he did what he said he was going to do. He made sure that we got these performances, and that's when the phone rings again, and the relationship is in full flow. And that's what I always try to do. The film industry is all about relationships and collaboration, and that's what I try and build. What I want directors and all of my colleagues, whether it's DPs, production designers, costume designers, to realize is that in the sound department, we're filmmakers too. We're not just these kind of geeks that sit there thinking about time code and and technical aspects. I always try and present myself as a filmmaker first, and a production sound mixer as a bolt-on, alongside the fact that I'm a filmmaker. And everything that I say is quite measured. I try and come across again as a collaborative partner rather than someone that is an adversary that is trying to stifle the creativity on the set. And that's a really, really key aspect of the way I try and present myself, and potentially what has helped my success.
That's wonderful. That's great. Um, let's talk about, besides getting the best performance you can. You do have other little responsibilities with your tracks. Do you, in fact, Israel Gutierrez has a question. He says, and it's on the topic I was going to bring up. Do you still record wild tracks, room tones, effects on location, or is that something that you aren't able to do as often anymore? How often are you called in to play for that sort of thing?
So one of the things that I've done throughout my career is I created a relationship on my first film with a supervising sound editor called Danny Sheehan. And what happened after my first film, I didn't have any commercial clients left because here's the deal. My first film was 6 weeks long. It was only 6 weeks. It was a low budget movie. But in that 6 weeks, my commercial clients moved on to other people because that's how quick the commercial industry changes. And so at the end of the film, what I did was I didn't have any work, and so I phoned the dialogue editor, who was also the supervising sound editor on that movie, introduced myself, and went in and sat with him. And we got on like a house on fire. And basically, I created a relationship with Danny where he taught me about dialogue editing, and I just took everything in. I also spent a lot of time with the director in the cutting room, listening to the Avid cut, listening to the mistakes that I made, listening to the things that I did well. And that has followed me throughout my career. Whenever I've had a chance, particularly when I've been working with Guy Ritchie or Matthew Vaughn, Danny Sheehan has generally been the supervising sound editor, particularly on Guy's early movies. And he's still doing Matthew's movies now. And what I've had is an opportunity to go and work with those guys in post, to go into the final mixes, not just dropping in for a day to have a coffee and say, hi, how are the tracks sounding? Really nice to see you, but actually doing the full 3 weeks in the final mix.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so what the point that I'm getting to is I realized a long time ago that one of the battles I didn't need to fight was for room tone in every single situation. Because I know that what will happen is, firstly, Danny will find 2.5 seconds in between the dialogue and he will loop that. And it's not that I'm forcing him to loop it, but here's the thing. Nowadays, these cameras that we're using on film sets, the moment they cut, we have additional fans in the cameras come on. So when you get room tone, the first thing is nowadays, if you are going to get room tone, you need to run the cameras as well, because otherwise the room tone is worthless because it's got a fan noise on it that the actual production tracks didn't have. So that requires, you've got 3 cameras. The director said, okay, guys, so that's it. We're going to move the cameras. And suddenly you're saying, whoa, can we have some room tone, but can we also run the cameras? I'm not going to put them through that over a situation where I feel that there isn't a problem with the background noise. If Danny or any supervising sound editor, dialogue editor needs it, they will find 2 seconds and they will loop it. When I will do room tone is when we have a problem, when there is something, potentially there's some kind of hum that's out on the street outside the window, something unique that I think to myself, actually, a 2-second loop is going to be shonky. It's not going to sound right. This is actually something that I need to get 30 seconds of. And they can loop that 30 seconds and it'll be cool. Wind in the trees. If we're working alongside a road, an atmosphere track of the traffic going past the road, all of that stuff is super valuable. You can't loop that. You need it. But what I'm not going to do is have a carte blanche rule of whatever happens, I'm going to get my 30 seconds. Because here's the deal. In my opinion, if I do that, it's like the little boy that cried wolf. If I ask for it when I don't really require it, when I do really need it, they're going to be pissed off and not give it to me. So I choose my battles wisely, and I get the atmosphere tracks that I know post will require, and the ones that I think it's really easy for post to steal and sample just a couple of seconds in between the dialogue, I'll leave it to them.
Yeah, and we also, you were talking about plugins before. We have some great plugins that can just give them just half a second, and it can build a longer piece that's seamless. Yeah,
exactly. And because I'm a real fanboy of what you guys do in post. I want to know every single advantageous plugin that you've got. I want everything. Things are moving so fast, right? They change year to year. And so I'm making sure that I keep on top of it, because I honestly feel that I'm going to be a better production sound mixer for my directors if I know what the post process is. So I don't see the post process as us and them, as in production sound and post sound. I see it more that it's a collaboration. And if at all possible, if the post guys are on when I get hired, I will talk to them about my workflow. I will have as many conversations. On No Time to Die on the Bond, I was talking to Oliver Tarney, who's the supervising sound editor, 3 months before we started shooting. And that is really what all of us want. You guys in post and us in production. That's what we want to be able to do.
No, absolutely.
The problem is sometimes it's not possible because you guys get hired a little bit later on.
Yeah, and sometimes the production mixer is on another show at that time. They just sort of moved on. That's exactly. No, absolutely. It's sometimes we're We
I honestly think that the more collaboration and the more dialogue there is between production sound and post-production sound, the greater our the more powerful our craft will become. Because if I can give you the tracks you need, you're going to be able to build greater effects around them. And also, if I'm confident that what I can get away with on the set, then I'm not going to have to hold my director up. I'm not, let me give you an example. On Guardians of the Galaxy,
Yes, please.
we went on to, James Gunn took us onto the top of a skyscraper in the city of London on a Sunday morning to do a scene that was not supposed, it was basically going to be a scene out in space. And what we could hear down below was church bells.
Oh,
And
wow.
James loves production dialogue. James doesn't want to loop unless he absolutely has to. He's a comedy director. He believes that there is something unique and magical in comedy dialogue that is very hard to recreate in a loop
Oh,
stage.
sure.
And so he wanted to protect it. And he turned to the producer and said, listen, we need, how long are the bells ringing for? And I think they sent a PA down to the church, and the PA said, the bells are going to ring for an hour and a half. And James said, you know what, to the producer, I think we should just leave it for an hour and a half. We'll rehearse it. Let's take a break. Everyone can have a coffee, because I really don't want to record with these bells. And because I know we're going to have to loop. And the producer came over to me and said, Simon, listen, we got a situation here. I'm concerned that we're not going to make the day, that we're going to lose light if we don't start shooting now. James is rightly very concerned about these bells. What do you think? And I said, okay, I tell you what, rather than tell you what I think, I want to do something. Can we please do a rehearsal, and can we ask the cast on the rehearsal not just to mark the dialogue through, to say the lines at the volume that they'll say when we shoot, so that I get an idea about what can be achieved. Just one rehearsal is all I need, and then I'll have an answer for you 5 minutes later. We recorded the rehearsal. My assistant stuck it straight into isotope. And by the way, we're just production sound guys. We're not isotope experts. But he stuck the rehearsal into isotope.
Sure.
Had a quick look at the spectral graph. Okay, drew some circles around the bells that were right down low in the mix. Put it through the process. Listened to it. We got rid of the bells in 5 minutes. Wow. And so I went over to James and the producer, and I said, look, we've just taken that rehearsal through a post-production process, and we're not expert in the post-production process.
Yeah.
We know that your post-production team are going to be able to do this process far, far better than we have. But as a test, we did it. And what I can tell you from that test is you can shoot right now with the bells. The post team will get rid of them afterwards. And James was like, great, let's shoot. And so that was a really, really good example
That's awesome.
of how production sound can use those production tools in a very, very non-aggressive way on the set. I'm not saying that we should be actually doing anything to process the production soundtracks, but to actually record a rehearsal and then give the director the confidence to be able to shoot with some background noise, knowing that it wasn't going to cause him to loop the whole scene, was just fantastic.
That's great.
So there's a really good example of how modern techniques and modern tools can help all of us.
That's wonderful. That's great. Let me ask you a little bit about, I don't want to get too terribly technical, but I do want to ask you a little bit more. You were saying before with we're able to do so many channels as needed. What's the most amount of channels you've recorded on a show? What's a scene that was just, it went, you said 32 before. Is that like the highest around in there? Or?
We've got access to 34 tracks on my recorder. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, we did a 34 track recording, but I've got to be honest. We didn't have any cameras on that recording. What that was we were actually recording some playback tracks for animated characters who are going to be in an upcoming movie that I'm recording. And so what those 34 tracks were there, we had, in fact, it was 32 that we actually used on the characters. We had 16 booms out and 16 radio mics out. And what we're going to do, and the reason why we recorded on booms and radio mics, is because those lines of dialogue will be played back on the set to interact with the live action characters. And what we don't know yet is when we get into the scene where the live action character is going to be prioritizing the boom or the radio mic. So we've recorded the animated characters on boom and radio, so that when the dialogue editor has to put the whole thing together, if the live action character who's on camera is on a boom, they'll use the animated character's boom mic. But let's say the live action character on camera is on a wide shot, the dialogue editor will be using their radio mic, which means it would be better for audio continuity to use the animated characters radio mic. So that was a 32 track recording. On a day-to-day basis, how many tracks am I using? Probably about 20 on a day-to-day basis. On a musical, a bit more. So for instance, right now I'm about to do a musical, and just before we even start talking about production sound, let's talk about what I'm putting into my machine, into my recording machine from Pro Tools.
Yes.
So I'm putting, so let's do a little track count here before I've even mic'd anyone up on the set.
Right.
I've got that dialogue playback that we just spoke about. Okay. I'm only going to send in a single track because that's going to go into their earwigs.
Yeah.
So I've got dialogue playback. I've got the time code associated with that dialogue playback going into an audio track. So there's two. Then I've got mono music and vocal. Okay, so everything all in one track.
A full mix, yeah.
When I say vocal, I mean singing. Okay. Then I've got left music, right music, vocal only, in other words, a cappella. Then I've got the click track, so that if we're playing a click for dancing, the picture editor's got access to it. And then I've also got the time code from that music. So right there, we've got 8 tracks before we even open the microphone.
Right.
So then let's add another 2 tracks of mix to that. So that's 10 tracks. So there's 10 tracks before we've actually put any isolated mic tracks. Then, we'll have 2 booms on everything. Right now I'm using Super C-Mix, which have 2 tracks per boom, because you've got the processed and the unprocessed, which is another story. So yeah, I mean, look, we use a lot of tracks now.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that I'm very careful about metadata. I'm very careful about track labeling. What I don't do is just record a mishmash of kind of tracks all over the place. It's very, what I'm presenting to Sound Post is regimented. Those tracks of playback that I was just talking about are not going to hop around. They're going to be on the same track throughout the whole shoot. Our leading lady will be on the same track on her radio mic. She will always be on radio mic number 1. The leading man will always be on radio mic number 2. The boom track will always be on the same track. So that basically when that dialogue editor gets this incredible body of tracks, rather than it just being impossible to keep up with where everything was, I'm presenting it in an extremely organized fashion to give the dialogue editor the best opportunity of finding the best track for the performance.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. Just out of curiosity, how many lavs do you have in your kits? If you're going to the set for any, I mean, you can obviously get more if you anticipated, but just on any given day, what is your kit like? The kind of the pieces you have that you would take with you on a general show?
My kit's big, and it's generally because, and you know what, Steve, I've been really blessed. It wasn't big at the beginning, but everything we grow. And
sure, I saw you post a picture of it recently, I think.
Yeah,
rewired.
I did. And so my general working kit is 24. The ability to record 24 radio mics, 24 lavs.
Gotcha.
But my equipment and the way on this movie, and what I'll do is on every movie, I will read the script.
Sure.
I will look at the situation. Like I've just discussed a musical to you.
Yeah.
My last movie was an action movie, so it will have been a different setup. Mm-hmm. But what I will do is each time I do a movie, I will set up my equipment for that specific movie so that it is intuitive as possible for the narrative that I'm being asked to record.
Absolutely.
And on the movie that I'm about to shoot, although I have 24 lavs in my kit, what's actually rigged on the cart, ready to go with, so that all I have to do is say, hey, put that radio mic onto them, and turn the fader up without any playing with routing, without any unplugging XLRs. On this show that I'm about to do, it's 12 lavs and 3 booms.
Mhm.
And so that's going to cover me in every situation that I'm in on the show that I'm about to do.
Right, right. Uh, let's talk a little bit about some of the musicals you've worked on. You've worked on quite a few. You had the Mary Poppins, Aladdin, Mamma Mia. How much you've run into both situations where it's all playback and you're trying to record production vocals for these songs. Can you talk about the differences of each of those and maybe some instances where of one of the other that you've worked through?
You know, I never set out to be a musical, someone that prioritized musicals, and it's just happened.
Yeah.
Wow, I just love musicals. I'm so blessed to have landed in this world of musical film. And so let me give you a bit of background before I answer the technical
Please.
question you just asked me.
Absolutely.
Me and my team got asked to go and do at the time, a small movie. I think the budget was probably 18 million US, and we were shooting in Budapest, and it was a film called Copying Beethoven, starring Ed Harris. And we'd never done a musical before, but as I say, I had a background in DJing. When I was a kid, I played guitar. So and also coming from commercials and music videos as a young sound mixer. Music, commercials are an incredibly creative place, and we did a lot of funky stuff on commercials where we would record live vocals and stuff like that. And okay, it was only for a 60-second commercial, but it was a place for me to fine tune my ability and learn what worked and what didn't work. So anyway, fast forward to kind of 2008 or something like that, and we got asked to do Copying Beethoven with Ed Harris. And what Ed said to the director was, he said, look, the way that Beethoven wrote music was he would have a violin, and he would pick up the violin and he would play a phrase on the violin, and then he'd hum it, and then he'd go over to his piano and he'd play it on the piano. And Ed basically didn't play the violin and he didn't play the piano, but he's an incredible actor, and he wanted to blag it, and he did it very, very well. But what we did to help him blag that he could play these instruments was, when he picked up the violin, we would, on our first musical, have the phrase that he was going to play piped into an earwig. Mm-hmm. So we'd have one phrase ready to go, and he'd get that through his earwig, and he'd hear beep beep, and he'd do that, and that, so he would pretend to play the violin, and then he'd do 3 lines of dialogue, walk over to the piano, and then we'd be playing back a piano track, and with him humming along. And so that was, although it was a reasonably low budget musical, it was incredibly taxing for the sound department. It wasn't an easy job for us. We did it with, we did it, and we didn't make any mistakes. But afterwards, I thought, what? Me and my team, we can do this. We hit a home run here, and it was good, and we kind of and it worked in post, and I guess we got a bit of a reputation, and that led to me being asked to do Mamma Mia. Now, Mamma Mia for me was suddenly I got offered Mamma Mia, and it was, wow, I'm going to do a movie with Meryl Streep in it. Yeah. And what we got back from Meryl was that Meryl said in her pre-records to the director, she was recording a couple of the tracks, and in the pre-record she said, well, look, I'm going to sing it here, but when we go on the set, I want to do it live. And the director, Phillida, was like, well, okay, why would you? And Meryl said, well, this first track, I'm going to be climbing as I'm singing. I'm climbing onto a cowshed roof. And she said, and there's no way right now in the pre-record that I can know how my body's, when I'm going to be reaching to get my hand onto something and pull myself up. So actually, this pre-record that we're doing isn't going to have the right breathing rhythm or have any effort in my vocal. Yeah. So although I'm going to record it now, when we do it on the set, I'd really like to try and do it live so that we can get those breaths and efforts as part of the vocal. Mm-hmm. And then there was another song that she did with Amanda Siegfried, which was incredibly emotional. and there was a very, very sparse backing track to it. So it was, you know, it was the kind of they were both almost in tears. So there was very much a kind of a breathing, an emotional breathing in their singing, that would have been really hard to do to lip sync. And
Yeah,
so that was another song that we recorded live. So we did two songs live on Mamma Mia, and they didn't have to re-record them.
that's wonderful.
And
Explain. Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
and so that then led on to Les Mis, and we did the
Yeah.
whole thing live. But to answer your question,
Yes.
come right back to your question.
Yes, yes.
What we're doing now on any musical, even if it's a musical where they are saying, where the director is saying, I don't want to do anything live on this. I don't believe that this narrative requires it to be live. And generally, that will be a big performance type song with a very, very rich music backing track, rather than something sparse like a acoustic guitar. It'll be a full orchestration, and it will be, for instance, a dance routine. There's no need to do something like that live. It's going to be better if you do it to playback. But what we are doing, which is really, really exciting, what we're trying to do as much as possible now is, when we go from that production, that live production dialogue on the set, into the lip sync, we try and do the first, should we say, half a verse live. So what we do is we have the actors talking, and then they go into the song, and at least the first 3 or 4 lines or 5 lines of the song they do live with an earwig in.
Yeah.
And then on line number 6, it suddenly all comes out the JBLs and they go into lip sync. Now what that does is, and it's really interesting, it gives the re-recording mixer the ability, rather than having, there's the production dialogue there and there's a brick wall and we're into lip sync, and the audience potentially go, ooh,
Yeah.
there you go, I felt that. We went into lip sync at that point.
Yeah.
What it does is it gives the re-recording mixer this fantastic ability to crossfade
The bridge between them.
in a really sympathetic manner.
Yeah, yeah.
Based on the performance, based on the breaths, based on how the mics are working, so that you can go from that Sherps or DPA lav across gently into that pre-recorded U87. Now, the other interesting thing that supports that workflow is that when we're doing pre-records, and we're doing this right now on the show that I'm on right now, my boom operator every day is up at the pre-record studio, and he's putting they're doing the pre-records of the song on a U87, as they should do, but we've also got a Sherps above them and a DPA lav above them. So again, that will help. I'm not saying that they're going to use the Sherps or the lav for an enormous amount of the song, but for that couple of lines where they drift across from the live production dialogue,
Transitional.
So when you say, how does it work with, you know, what I would say is that rather than it being this old school version of, okay, on a musical we get a nice couple of days where they're singing and we're not having to record any sound, we're actually doing it in a completely different manner now. And even when we know that it's a lip sync song, we've got this bridge, as you say, at the beginning, which we're trying to create choice. And that's another thing. What I'm trying to do for my directors is, and my re-recording mixers, is give them choices.
Yes.
What I don't want to do is to railroad them into something that isn't going to support the narrative afterwards. I want them to be able to sit in that re-recording studio and say, wow, this guy has given us the ability to do whatever we want to do here.
Yeah.
Then I feel I've done my job properly.
That's wonderful. That's really great. No, that's really great to hear. You reminded me of a story that I was involved with, the show Nightmare Before Christmas. We had 2 people doing the voice of one character. Danny Elfman was doing the singing voice of Jack Skellington, but there was an actor who was doing his speaking voice, and we actually had Danny loop the first line of dialogue before the song, so to ease the transition. So yeah, there are all kinds of little tricks you can do to sort of make it a little more smooth and believable. Could you explain briefly, for people who don't know, what an earwig is and how you use it, and sort of how useful that wonderful piece is too? Because there's no wires involved, there's no transmission. it's a beautiful device. Could you talk to me about
Yeah. So an earwig is it's a tiny, tiny little it's like a hearing aid, but there is no cable that comes out of it. You can't see it in someone's ear. Now, there's two types. Well, first of all, let's talk about generic earwigs.
that?
There are earwigs that you can buy off the shelf, and some people you can put that earwig in their ear and you won't see it. But other people have smaller ear canals. So you'll try and put the generic earwig in and it won't quite fit. So you'll see this little bulge coming out here. So what we do on decent level musicals budget wise now is we get the main cast, we have their ear impressions taken by an audiologist,
Oh
and
wow.
we get bespoke earwigs for their specific ear canals. So we have, each actor has a left and a right earwig. They'll only work with one, but if their left ear is going to be on camera a little bit, we'll put it in their right ear. And vice versa. So we'll always choose the ear which is least likely to be seen in camera. But frankly, when you have a bespoke earpiece which has been custom molded for your actor, it's very, very hard to see. You'd have to be doing a close-up looking
Right.
right into the ear, and that's what we do nowadays. We get the whole cast having bespoke earwigs. But there's two ways of running earwigs. You can either run them through radio waves, which is a more modern way of using them. I don't like that system. I feel that it is unreliable. I'm yet to use a radio earwig that doesn't give me dropouts and have actors saying, you know what, I lost that for a moment there. So I actually go with a more old school methodology. I use an induction loop,
Yeah.
which was designed back in the day for hard of hearing people to be able to hear in cinemas, theatres, banks, post offices. Whenever they walk in, they've got induction loop hearing aids and they can hear everything. And
Right.
so that's what we do. We basically have a bunch of induction loop amplifiers, and each amplifier is designed for a different size loop, a different diameter loop.
Right.
We look at the set that we're in, and we choose the appropriate size amplifier, the
Hmm.
appropriate size gauge cable for the loop, and we put a loop
Yeah.
around the whole set.
Lay it on the floor, like, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that creates a magnetic field where the person standing within the loop can hear the music in their earwig. And that's generally how we do musicals.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I actually I'm blessed that in my film school I was able to learn a little bit about all the disciplines, and we did have several weeks of learning the aspects of production recording. And the earwig day was one of my favorite days, just
Yeah,
playing with it, and it was just fascinating to me
yeah.
that you can do.
And then there are other actors that love to use earwigs. I know that there's a couple of actors who are very well known that like to have an assistant play certain music tracks, to create an emotion. They will literally have an assistant with a kind of playlist depending on what the scene is. And then I know that there are other actors who potentially, if there's script changes at the last minute and suddenly the writer comes on in the morning and says, hey, that 6-page dialogue scene that you've learned, well, it's all changed. We're going with something different. And the earwig can be used to feed lines in, just not the whole line, but you can kind of give them bullet point props of what the next line is, just to liven up the memory of this new script page that they've been given 20 minutes before the shoot. So earwigs are an incredibly positive tool that are just, again, help and support the cast, and
Oh,
that's what we're there to
absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. You are up for an Oscar this year, and congratulations, sir, for the James Bond film No Time to Die, which I just saw again recently because I'm on one of the voting committees for one of the awards. I won't say which, but it just feels like such a busy film for someone like you, and so much action and stunt work and just all kinds of different situations. Any instances you can relate of complications to your work, and how you got through that astounding job.
I just had such a great time. The wonderful thing about doing a Bond film and look, is going to sound like a cliche, but it's true. Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson create a family, And one of their priorities is that the whole crew feel supported, looked after, and are treated incredibly well. And they feel that there is something that you can't put your finger on. So there's an extra bit of magic that comes out of the film if everyone's having a great time. And what I would say is that rather than a Bond film feeling like a huge machine, which is what it is. It's a huge machine. We're traveling around the world with multiple units, multiple cameras, multiple people, but you get onto the set and, it feels like you're shooting an independent film. Barbara and Michael are both there on the set all day, every day. They're up the top of the mountain with you. They're there at 7 a.m. when everyone's setting up. And, and there is just really a feeling of camaraderie. In terms of how it was for sound, it was just wonderful. I had a great time. What I find incredibly challenging is musicals, and it was actually really lovely going back and doing an action movie just with dialogue. I just had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
But what I would say was that you have to, again, we were very, very careful about how we presented our sound. We knew that we were going to have challenges with the IMAX cameras. So myself and Oliver Tarney worked very, very hard to find out what we could get away with IMAX noise and what we couldn't. And Kerry Fukunaga was extremely collaborative in asking us. So he said, look, do some tests. Let me know what scenes I can get away with IMAX cameras. And we did some tests. We worked out what sort of volume the actors needed to be speaking at to be able to notch out the IMAX with isotope or whatever process was used. And because it wasn't just one process, it depended on the situation. As you know, you're not going to use just one tool. You're going to use whatever tool is best for the situation. But we basically, we realized that we could shoot IMAX and get great sound on the action sequences if people were a little bit louder and we were getting a bit more signal to noise. But on the very emotional sequences where the volume comes right down, we needed to go to 65 mil. And Linus, the DP, and Carey were incredibly collaborative, and they listened to what Oliver and I had to say about it and adjusted what they were going to do. And so again, I just felt very, very supported. And and also we did Layer Cake with Daniel a number of years ago, which was a small film. And so myself and my boom operator, Arthur Fenn, knew Daniel very, very well. We'd worked on a small movie with him. He trusted us because he didn't have to loop that movie. And so what we did on the Bond was we were able to have a radio mic on Daniel at all times. Daniel does most of his own stunts. When you see Bond doing something crazy, generally it's Daniel. He's an athlete. There's no doubt about it. But what was incredibly collaborative about what he did for us was, rather than saying, listen, I'm only going to shout one line here and I don't want to wear the radio mic because it's going to restrict me, I'll just loop the line. He'd say, guys, if I put the radio mic on, are you going to get it or will we have to loop anyway? And I said, no, Daniel, if you put it on, you'll get it. And he said, okay, give me the thing, I'll put it on. And that's what he did for the whole show. So we had a great time. We had a cast that wanted to help. We had producers and directors that were incredibly supportive. We had a DP that loved sound and wanted to again to just be a team player. So we had a great time on the Bond. It wasn't difficult. It was fun. It was challenging, but it wasn't difficult. And what's the difference on a film set between challenging and difficult? Challenging is when you have solutions to problems and the other departments around you support you in your strive to do your craft justice. What's difficult is when you're with filmmakers that don't want to give sound a chance, and that certainly wasn't the case on No Time to Die. It was just a teamwork. It was a team effort.
That's wonderful. That's great. And as I said, you're up for an Oscar. I would be remiss if I did not get your comment on the most recent decisions that the Academy has made regarding the Oscar ceremony coming up in a few weeks. How do you feel about that? The several categories, including sound, is not going to be live. I've expressed my feelings online. I'd like to hear what you think about that.
I think it's an incredible mistake, and I feel disappointed. And I'm hoping that the Academy sees sense and they can reverse this decision.
Yeah,
I think that it's a bad decision, and I think that there has been a huge outcry. And what I'd like to say about it is this: we're all incredibly honoured to be members of the Academy. It's what one of the highlights of my career was being asked to be an Academy member. I'm incredibly proud of that fact, as I know all of my colleagues in the Academy are.
sure.
And so I don't want to really dump on the Academy. I know that they've got a tough job to do,
Of
but
course.
this is but nevertheless, this is a mistake and it needs to be reversed. And the reason it's a mistake is simply because we as an industry have made such huge steps forward in terms of equality and inclusivity. That's what we've been working on over the last 10 or 15 years. And the Academy have done a wonderful job with that. They have actually been one of the motivating factors in us being a more inclusive industry, giving opportunities to people that wouldn't potentially have had opportunities to get into our wonderful industry.
Just in the last few
And
years. Yeah, absolutely.
and what I would say is that you can't get any more unequal or uninclusive than having a two-tier system as to who can, you know, use the red carpet with everyone to enter the awards, or who is actually being asked to arrive early and go and be filmed in an empty room and pretend there's an audience there.
Yeah.
And what I would say is this, I would just say to the Academy, please rethink this decision. We've got your backs. We support you. We know that it's a tough job, you know, but I think it's a mistake. And what I'm hoping is that they recognize the fact that it's a mistake and we are treated with the same kind of respect as our colleagues. And I'm not just going to talk about sound here. What
Sure.
I'd like to talk about is every single craft that has been sidelined and been marginalized in this new proposed two-tier system. And, it's really, really simple. If we don't have any production design and we don't have any editorial and we don't have any sound, what are you left with? You know,
Exactly.
you're left with a shot against a grey
A
background
static shot. Yeah.
that doesn't have any editing. There's no wide, there's no mid, there's no tight. There's just a single camera shot. Okay, you can't hear what anyone's saying. So it's like, come on, guys. We celebrate the art of filmmaking together. One of the wonderful things about our industry is that it's a collaboration and
Yes.
that it's teamwork. Listen to how many times throughout this conversation I've spoke about collaboration and
Yeah.
teamwork, and
Absolutely.
that's not just paying lip service. That's true. That's what we do on a film set, and
Yes.
it's a terrible, terrible shame that someone's had this awful idea that is actually going to create a division between some grades and other grades. That's it, really. That's my feelings.
That's what very well said. I appreciate that. And before I let you go, I always ask my guests for their sage advice, their wisdom to anyone who might be thinking about entering this crazy business, about joining the ranks of what we do. And Israel has a question in the background there about that sort of thing, recommending a beginner kit, an inexpensive kit for someone who starts doing what you're doing. Any recommendations in their must-have first kit? But also generally, what kind of advice would you give someone beginning in this situation?
Okay, let's do the beginning situation first, and then we'll
Yes,
come
please.
to the kit for Israel.
Yes.
I've got your back, Israel. Don't worry, I'm going to come to that in a minute. First of all, this business takes over our lives. It's an artistic endeavor. We're not working 9 to 5 in a bank. And so what I would say is buckle up, because if you really want to do this, you're going to be on set a lot and you're going to be away from home a lot, and you really, really need to be passionate about it. And you know what they say? if you love your work, you're never going to do a day's work in your life. And that is certainly true of the film industry. I love what I do and I'm passionate about it, and that's why I do it. But what I would say is that it is only for passionate people, because we give so much of our emotion and time and effort and energy into this business. It's not like a normal job. And so what I would say is that make sure you love it before you commit to it, because it really is very, very time consuming, but incredibly rewarding as well. What I would say to Israel about kit is this. The first thing I want to say about kit is a good sound mixer and a good boom operator. And guys, listen, it doesn't matter how good you are with the sound equipment, how good you are with your knowledge of recording, how good you are with the faders. If the mic's in the wrong place, you're going to get shonky sound. And so respect to all of the boom operators out there and all of the utilities. In England, we call them first assistant sound and second assistant sound. This is really, really important. It's a really, really key thing that you guys need to understand, because I know a lot of you young people now are coming through with digital content, and you're learning to go out on your own, and you've got a short boom pole and a bag around your neck. Understand that the day when you get your first job with a boom operator, your sound quality is going to increase exponentially. You need a good boom operator. A good boom operator is your bridge between having absolutely outstanding sound and having average sound. So get a boom operator and choose your boom operator carefully. That's more important than any equipment. What I would say about equipment is a good sound team will get good sound on average equipment. An average sound team will get average sound on great equipment. So it's not what the equipment is, it's what you do with it. But I know that you're going to say, yeah, he didn't really answer the question. So what I would say is this: get yourself a nice small recorder. You know, if you can't afford the recorder you want, buy one on the second-hand market. Buy the recorder rather than thinking you have to buy it new, because guess what, we're all geeks, we look after our equipment. When you see something come up for second hand on the second-hand market, generally it's going to be from an audio professional, and they will have looked after it. So don't be scared to buy second hand, to buy a better mix, a better recorder than you'd otherwise be able to afford. I would say that, you know, budget level sound devices equipment is great. Budget level Zaxcom equipment is great. You know, make sure that you overspec, because what you're doing tomorrow, where you're recording, you know, some digital content for social media, within 6 months you'll be recording a commercial and you're going to need 6 tracks. So I would say that, you know, try and overcompensate and buy something, so you're not in 3 months' time going, that wasn't good enough, I need to buy again. Try and buy the best recorder that you can. And when I say the best, I mean, you know, the most tracks that you can afford from the get-go. Buy yourself a gun mic, buy yourself a hypercardioid, and have 2 lavs, and try and use a decent, a professional radio mic system rather than a semi-professional system. Try and buy yourself some Lectrosonics or Zaxcom or Audio Limited radio mics, rather than going down a semi-professional radio mic system. Because look, here's the thing: radio mics are always a compromise anyway. They're never going to sound as good as the boom. What's going to help you get great radio mic sound is a decent radio mic system. If you're using a semi-professional system, you're always going to have range problems. So that's it, really, Steve. That's for you, Israel. That's my perception of how to answer the question to you, sir.
That's awesome. Simon, thank you so much. I know it's very late. It's actually tomorrow where you are. You're time traveling. You're actually, yeah. I think it's passed into the next day. What is the future like, Simon?
You know what, Steve? Thank you for giving me the opportunity. What I've really enjoyed about this is that we've managed to really get technical. We've really geeked out.
Yeah.
And it's not. I know that all of your audience are going to be people that understand what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So we've been able to go quite deep into the technicalities of sound, which has been a real pleasure. But also, guys, just remember, you know, finally, you know, sound is a creative medium. It's a creative endeavor, and the equipment is the same as a musical instrument. And what I want you to think about is this: you could give, $100 guitar to Jimi Hendrix, and he's going to play an amazing concert. You could give, a fantastic Fender Stratocaster to someone that doesn't play guitar well, and it's going to sound awful. And it's the same with sound equipment.
Yeah.
The sound equipment is our musical instrument, and rather than focus on that, rather than focus on the technicalities of how it works, focus on the screen and what you're recording and the performance that you're capturing.
Right, right. No, that's great advice. Simon, thank you so much. And best of luck coming up at the Academy Awards. If you're going to be in town, drop me a line. Maybe we'll go get a pint somewhere.
Wonderful.
All right, everyone out there. Great. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you at the next one.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. See you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.